Alrighty, hi everyone. So let me start out by saying I'm excited to be here today with you all. Regis holds a very special place in my heart, and I'm excited to give back and hopefully add some value. So my webinar is titled How to Stand Out in a Crowd, and a little bit about me. Click. Hold on. Alrighty, so a little bit about me. I graduated in 2016 from Regis University. I got a bachelor's in health information management, and then I also had the pleasure of playing on the Regis women's basketball team and coaching my last year due to a knee injury. And so I started my career path out in the healthcare industry, really wanting to utilize the degree I got. Was very eager to, use the skill set. And so I started as a Medicare billing representative for Quorum CVS right after college. And then due to a move and things like that, went across town closer to Wheat Ridge area. And I started at Wheat Ridge Animal Hospital, where I joined a team there to help integrate a new software program into their hospital. But shortly after that project ended, I realized I just wasn't very happy. I had gotten this great degree, but it just didn't fulfill me the way I was hoping. And so that's when I made kind of the courageous decision to, jump careers. And so now, as you can see, I'm a recruiter for Northwestern Mutual, and I work in a subsection of HR, and I'm in the finance industry now. And I absolutely love my job. It was one of the best, career jumps ever. It was a little scary though. So anyway, the type of work I do as a recruiter, 5 of the main things that I focus on is building relationships, especially with people in my office, but definitely candidates I interview as well. I focus on sourcing candidates for positions and looking for specific skill sets and experience an individual might have that I think could make them really successful in one of our positions. And then I review multiple resumes every day. And in my office, I also do all of the interviewing. So that consists of about 5 steps for my office, but multiple different steps and taking care of candidates throughout that process. And then quarterly, I focus on continued process improvement just to keep up with the newest hiring trends going on. So for example, everything going digital, text message alerts, things like that. And so I really wanted to focus on professionalism today and a few other topics, but what recruiters look for when hiring. Professionalism is one of the easiest factors a candidate can control. For example, when someone comes in to meet me, I want to make sure that they're dressed in business professional. Most of the men and women I meet in my line of work, they're in full suit and ties. And when they don't come dressed appropriately, it's just something I take note of. Another factor that you can be in control of is timeliness. So it's very important to me that people show up either ahead of schedule or on time. Both of our time is very valuable. And so when, people show up in a late manner, again, just something I take notice of. And so, to even have made it into the door to meet me, it usually comes down to you either have a professional resume or a very impressive resume, one of the two. And so what that typically looks like is, I look at 50 resumes a day per se, and I filter the few I want to talk with. And then from there, I'm either calling to set an initial appointment based off the skill set or experience on that resume, or I'm calling to do an approach call. And so, that's about 50 resumes. I might call 10 to set up a second interview. And then from there, I want them to come into my office and see our environment and our culture. And again, that's where the professionalism comes into play of, are you dressed appropriately? Are you on time? Are you respectful to everyone you meet in my lobby and things like that? And so, again, the resume is the first key to the step of, getting into the interview and the selection process. And so to give you an idea, I read this fact the other day that recruiters spend an average of 6 seconds reviewing an individual resume. And I was shocked, but then I kind of was thinking about it and I was paying attention, and I probably spent about 10 seconds looking through my own resumes. And so one thing to me that I wanted to touch on was you really have to make those 6 or 10 seconds count. And so one of the biggest mistakes I see when Virgo's changing on me. One of the biggest mistakes I see when people give me resumes is they don't know what type of job they're applying for, or they just haven't done the due diligence ahead of time. So one thing I always point out is know what type of job you're applying for. Is this a creative position? And creative positions are things like social media designer, an artist, a filmmaker, a graphic designer. Or are you applying for a more conventional position, such as, a paralegal, an admin position, a manager, or an assistant? And so I've included some examples on here of just, what stands out to me for both of these types of positions. These are some examples of creative resumes. And so some things to highlight on there is, it's more common as we become digital that, you should put a picture in there. You can use a little bit of color. That's not against the rules now. But I really want to see if you can do different formatting, if you can think outside the box a little bit. Another key factor is you should put your social media accounts on there. Again, this is for a creative, position. But I can tell you right now, myself and a lot of other recruiters as well, one of the first things we look at is your social media accounts, because I want a good idea of who I sit with when you come into my office. And so, including your LinkedIn, your Facebook, things like that, it's very helpful. But again, on the creative side, it also gives you a really great platform to highlight some of the work you've done. So for instance, I have some web designers that have included, links to their portfolios online. And that just shows that they went above and beyond to include extra information, but it's not cluttered and clogged on the resume. And then, we've got some examples of our more conventional or traditional resumes. And these are more of the ones that I look at in my line of work. But I wanted to point out some key aspects. First of all, the one on the left, it says it captures immediate attention with a personal branding statement. Are you putting something at the very top that I can't ignore? So for example, we've got the award-winning executive chef. I see that and I want to continue moving forward and reading what else has he accomplished. Secondly, we really want to incorporate skills and keywords from the job description you're looking at. And so I know it's a pain in the butt, but one of the things I always, look for as a recruiter is the target words. I have a job in mind that I'm looking to fill, and there's certain keywords or target words that I'm looking for as I go through that experience or go through that skill set. And so, it's really important to digest those and make sure you're updating every resume for the job you're applying to. Third, highlight some of the work achievements you've accomplished, and making it in bullet point form is the easiest way for me to highlight the key aspects of you. So again, just put, the most important things or your best achievements in those bullet points, but that's usually what's catching my eye and I'm jumping down to. I'm not necessarily concerned of where you worked or the title, but I really just want to see, what's special, what did you accomplish there, and really start to paint that picture of, why you're meeting me today. And then lastly, any examples that you can quantify or achievements are very, very helpful, because most likely, if you tell me that you increase sales, when you come in and meet me, I'm going to ask, how much did you increase sales? Did you increase sales 1% or 42%? It's very big differences. And so if you can highlight those, it really stands out to us. Something else I want to highlight is, you always want your name at the top. The example on the right has financial analyst position, bold at the second line. And so that reminds me, this is the position I'm looking for. This is why I'm tailoring my skill set for this position. But you can tell these are two very more traditional and simple formatted resumes that look very professional. One thing I do want to highlight is, the resume on the right has education and credentials at the bottom. I think those are really important to include on a resume, but I would definitely keep them closer at the bottom. Just because if you're unqualified, I want to see the qualifications or your skill set at the top, but put those things on the bottom, but you don't need to have them at the very top. I think we were taught that, long ago, and, I'm going to assume you have a college degree or that, you're qualified. And so now to my favorite part. If you make it through the first phase of getting past the resume, I definitely am going to call you in to come in for an interview. And there's typically 4 things that stand out to me in an interview. And they're, I think pretty easy, but they just take some preparation beforehand. One of the first things that I really, appreciate in an interview with a candidate is, can they tell stories? I like having the example of, tell me some of your successes, tell me some of your disappointments. Not everyone is going to be perfect for every single job, but I want to know some of those stories. And again, with that, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, but be prepared if you're going to give examples. They need to be concise and to the point. I like 2-minute stories. I don't want to hear a 20-minute long drawn out explanation. I just want to know that you put in the prep work to have examples ready. But it also paints a better picture if the conversation is, more in depth than just me asking questions, getting one-word responses, or just very generic responses. So I always find that people's ability to tell stories to me is always very captivating. Secondly, what stands out is people's confidence. So again, going back to the professionalism, those first impressions when I, walk downstairs to get someone, that is going to stick out. And so again, a good handshake. Are you smiling? Are you happy? Things that I look for in terms of confidence while interviewing is definitely eye contact and body language. I want to make sure that you can carry a conversation and eye contact with me, but also how you're sitting in the chair and things like that is very telling to me as the recruiter. I can tell usually within the first 10 minutes or so if this is the right position for someone. And a lot of it is telling in our body language. So I think that's just something to be very aware of is, if we're not paying attention, if we're very fidgety, things like that, those key points are probably being picked up. Another thing that I really appreciate and stands out to me is when people ask questions. The conversation in general is just far more enjoyable for myself and the applicant if both people are having this open dialogue. And so I really appreciate when people ask me, like, what is the culture of my company? What are our competitors like? What's the why of the company? And more recently, when I meet with younger people, they ask me, why do I enjoy working for my company? And so it just opens that door, and it means that you're interested in me, and it's not just a one-sided conversation. Also, from the applicant side, I find, when I was going through this career changing phase and I was interviewing people, I found that the person that sat down with me, usually when I asked them to describe the why of their company, how they described it based off their body language and the words that they use, are they happy with their culture? It's a very good indicator to me of the type of company and if that person likes to work there. So again, just be aware you're going to work with like-minded people. So that was very telling to me. I had 1 or 2 interviews where I didn't get the best feeling. And then when I asked, the recruiter to explain the why, I was quite surprised when she didn't really have an explanation of it. And I know not everyone's, in love with their position, but it's usually a good indicator for the recipient of, what is the company culture like. Lastly is going to be the research. I'm always very impressed when people have done research on my company and the position. It just means they went, again, above and beyond to make an effort and make an impact on me while interviewing. And from the recipient side, the more research the more leverage you have in the interviewing and the selection process. And what I mean by that is, a lot of people, we get excited and just eager to go for a job, and we don't do some of the research, behind it. Whereas if you go in and you're applying for administrative assistant position, I want to look up what does the average salary of an administrative assistant make, so that come time, if we get to the dotted line, I can leverage the knowledge I have to say, I think I deserve more money because this is the salary. this is the average in Denver, and I'm afraid, I think I'm at least average, if not better. And so again, just the more research you can do on the position and the company, it really just proves really powerful and gives you a lot of leverage. I'm always very impressed when people come in and they can kind of combat me. It's just, again, more of that engagement of two people. But those are four things that really stand out to me in an interview. And so I know a lot of you guys are alumni on here, so I really wanted to touch on changing careers and industries, like myself, but also in the line of work I do. About 70% of the interviews I do are career changers. And with that, I really wanted to talk about behavioral interviewing and how a lot more companies, my company included, are moving towards this method. And it's especially important for executive positions because behavioral-based interviewing is interviewing based on discovering how the interviewee acted in specific employment-related situations. So I really want to see if you, the candidate, have the ability to problem solve. Again, this is just going back to, do you have concise examples of when you were successful, when you solved a problem, things like that. And so, we're really stepping away from, the traditional of tell me your strengths, tell me your weaknesses. I want you to tell me why those are your strengths or why those are your weaknesses. And so when I started the journey of switching careers, I actually met with an HR specialist who helped me kind of walk through a more non-traditional resume writing experience. And what that kind of entailed was, he made me recall 25 of my most memorable accomplishments and things that I was very proud of. And these things can be personal or professional. And what we did from there is we filtered through why those accomplishments are important to me and how I went about achieving those accomplishments. And so it then gave me the ability to focus on other areas, industries, life experiences where I had gained knowledge and growth, even though it may not have been in a professional work setting or in the industry I was trying to get into. And so, one example I give is I explained one of my most amazing accomplishments was I graduated from Regis with no debt. And it's important to me because it set me up financially for a better future. And I achieved that goal by playing on a basketball scholarship, keeping my grades up enough to keep that scholarship, but also working summer jobs every summer, living with family to save money on room and board one year. And so by telling that story and that accomplishment, it really displayed multiple of my key strengths coming into the workforce, such as my time management skills, the discipline I have, working with multiple different individuals, whether it's professors, employers, things like that through the course of the year. And so then I could relate and explain, that time to whatever job I was trying to tailor it to. So from there, as I mentioned, I had gathered 25 accomplishments. I had wrote a paragraph on each of those of why they're important and how I went achieving those. And then from there, I became much more selective and, in my mind, powerful when I was trying to, change jobs or look for a new job. And what it entailed was I would find a job I liked, and based off, whether the qualifications, the requirements, or the experience they're looking for, I then would take my best 3 or 4 accomplishments out of my bank, per se, of 25 and put those on the resume. So again, tailoring each resume specific to the job I was applying to, but showing that I had experience, even though if it wasn't in the finance industry or in the marketing industry, I still had experience in these other areas. And so it gave me the opportunity to, one, really figure out what I enjoyed doing. What was I really good at? When you go through this process, themes start to highlight over and over again. But it also made me realize what I didn't enjoy doing. What jobs did I not like doing? I didn't like being chained to a desk all day. So I stopped applying to jobs attached to a desk all day. And so it then gave me the advantage of being more selective in the jobs I was applying to. But it also kind of gave me that peace of mind that I didn't feel limited to the industries I was getting into, because almost every example someone would ask me, I had a question or an answer for it, that, I could spin it to make myself more powerful. And, one thing that I look for as a recruiter when I'm interviewing people, I want to see how good of a buyer this person is, per se. Can they buy in? Do they have a track record of success? Are they willing to make sacrifices, things like that? But from the opposite end of people that are, trying to get into these new industries, things like that, I think it should be very much an interview of that company and that recruiter, because you want to be very selective, especially when changing industries and careers. In the process of, you want to join a good company, culture is very important, especially nowadays. And so take the time to, engage the interviewer as well. And I found that while I was, lacked the work experience per se, but I had all this other vast amounts of experience, it really gave me the option to see, is this a job I want, based off how the recruiter was, how she was explaining the jobs, things like that. And so from then, I went from applying to anything and everything I could to get out of my industry of healthcare and technology, to really figuring out what industries I wanted to be in, and then what of those jobs I wanted to be in. And, I also think when changing careers or industries, a huge help that I don't think we talk about enough is the ability to get an inside, basically. And what I mean by that is, in my line of work, anyone that is referred to me by somebody in my office, I'm going to sit down and meet with, just because it's someone that I respect in my office. And if they're speaking highly of them, I want to meet them. I want to be in front of them. So I'm always impressed when, I do have people apply online, that they, message me on Facebook and just say, hey, I'm looking forward to meeting you. I heard about your company. Or if you know someone or can meet someone in the company that you're interested in, what can you do to go above and beyond to maybe get a mutual connection and have someone refer you to someone in that company, refer you to a position you're interested in. It really just speaks volume of, that you're going above and beyond. But it's very important, because I think sometimes we feel captivated towards one field because that's where we have all of our experience. But you'd be surprised, if you know someone who's willing to speak highly of you, and, they can put you in front of the right person. And so I think that is just as important as the interviewing stage is, how are you being introduced? Are you another applicant that just applies online, or are you going above and beyond to get introduced to someone in that company or that position you're interested in? Another thing I didn't touch on previously back is cover letters are extremely important as well. So especially for our executive positions and higher level positions, a cover letter is always a really great first impression. And then from there, I think my best candidates, they will take a job description and pull from requirements. And so, using your resume to do kind of a non-traditional method, but pulling from the job description of saying, this is what you're looking for, this is how I can help, or this is what you're looking for, this is the experience I have. And so again, it's just another way to highlight yourself as you're trying to change careers, get into that different industry. And so those are some of the, important things I look for, when I'm going through this process, when I went through the process, but also, when I meet a lot of other people that are looking to change careers, the idea of changing careers is much more common, and it's okay to job hop for a year or two till you find what makes you happy. And so I think that's, a huge driving force of, why people are changing careers more often, why we're trying out new industries. And so I would say, if you're interested, I would definitely give it a try. So from there, I think we're going to go into questions. I really appreciate you guys listening for a little bit. And I think we're going to turn on the question board.
Mhm. If you have any questions, you can use the chat function to ask them. But just to kick things off, we have a couple of questions which were pre-submitted. One of the questions was, what red flags do you look out for in terms, if you're an applicant, like what are the red flags for the company, and from a recruiter perspective, what are the red flags you look out for from a candidate?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the red flags that, starting again from the beginning of the process of just getting the resume, one of the red flags that pops out to me is if your resume is not up to date or most relevant, it's not going to move forward to a second step, because it just means that you didn't take the time to move forward and, put that on there. Because it's always a red flag to me when I have someone come in and I sit down with them and I ask them about, hey, how is it working at Home Depot still? And they say, oh, actually, I started a new position and, I'm not working there anymore. Why is your resume, not answered or, not updated? And so that's a red flag to me. Other things that are a red flag is talking too much in an interview. So again, I think it's very important to go into that storytelling mode, but have concise examples. We don't want to hear, a 20-minute story about someone saving the office and things like that. So that's another red flag. Not being on time is a red flag to me, because my time is valuable as well as your own. I want to start on time. Those are three of my main ones. What other questions do we have?
What do you think are the challenges coming back to a new career after a career break, or like falling off the career ladder, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, I think the idea of the career ladder is shattered. Long ago, I feel like our parents or our grandparents worked at the same company for 20 years and they moved up the ladder, and that was wonderful. But that's just not very common in our day of age. And so I think once that happens, one way to combat that is, I think we put ourselves in these boxes of, oh, I can't go for that dream job of marketing because all I've ever done is IT. So why not, push yourself out of that comfort zone and, apply for that job. And again, just going back to taking previous experiences that you have, whether they're personal or professional, and apply them to that new position. I'm always very intrigued why people want to change careers. And so it gives them the opportunity to highlight, great things about them, or why they're, open to that career change. And so I think, don't get stuck on it. And I think if you put in the time to work on the resume and, the behavioral interviewing questions, that's a good way to jump back on the new path or the right path you're wanting. So,
if you want to ask questions, you can use the Q&A function here on the Zoom meeting. We welcome all questions. But another question that came in earlier this week was in terms of negotiation. Say you make the job offer, how is that up to you to negotiate, or is it up to another department?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it depends on each company. In my current line of work, I'm in control of the salary and of the positions, and so I have a pretty good idea. But I always think, from the flip side, as the applicant, you should fight for what you want. And so I don't think it's a bad thing when someone combats me and says, oh, well, I think I deserve more. I just want to know why they deserve more. And then from there, that's something that I can take to my upper management and explain, that reasoning. But again, that's just why it's so powerful to, have that leverage and knowledge of what you're wanting.
We have a question from Ayana. Thank you very much. Ayana asks, I feel my biggest challenge today is I started in a leadership position for 14 months, but then the contract ended, and so I'm back to applying for work again. But I notice it's harder to get back into a leadership position. Any tips?
Yeah. In that situation, I think it kind of feels like a step back, but it's not, I assure you. And so what I would do is I would focus on what were you successful with in those leadership positions? Why did you enjoy being in leadership? What changes did you make that, were for a positive impact on the company. And I would really start to highlight those. Because even when I look for, executive positions, I want to see, do they have a track record or previous successes? And leadership is a big point. So if you can highlight those skills or things you accomplished in those leadership positions, I would start with that and put those, again, kind of on the higher or more top end of the resume. And it then sets the, sets the tone of, I'm looking for this type of leadership position. This is what I'm good at. This is what I hope to continue improving on or making better. So hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you very much. Another question we got is, what are some of the questions that you shouldn't ask during an interview? I know you touched on the fact that it's good to ask questions, but are there any questions that you shouldn't ask when asked that question at the end of an interview?
Questions to not ask. I think one question that always kind of, surprises me is, is asking if, why this company? I think it's important to ask that. But going into that question too much, it sounds a little bit suspicious to me. And so that's one thing, hopefully I've done a good enough job explaining the job position, and I don't mind people asking about our competitors or things like that. But I think sometimes dwelling on one question or tapping into it a little bit too much, it makes me want to know kind of the deeper rooted reasoning of why you're asking that question. So maybe you can rephrase that, question of, where else would I be looking if I was interested? In my line of work, there's not typically, too many questions that people ask me that are negative. I would rather someone ask what they're feeling than us get later down in the stage of interviewing in the selection process, and then these concerns come up. So, I'm completely open. I know a lot of people I work with are completely open to many questions. But, I think just, again, your tone of voice and how you propose it, those are kind of the key indicators. We just had a question come in from Melissa. Thanks, Melissa. Since I'm currently working towards my degree, I find it challenging to find jobs that don't require a degree, and therefore makes it harder for me to move into a higher position or move up in my current position. Do you have any suggestions on how to get noticed without a degree? Great question, Melissa. One thing that stands out to me is, do you have experience in other positions? So again, I know you're getting your degree, but if you've worked at a restaurant for 5 years, let's say, have you moved up in that restaurant? Can you highlight those achievements you've had, even if you don't have your degree yet? Because to me, that shows a track record of success. You went from being a waiter to then, the restaurant manager. To me, that's impressive, just as much so as having the degree. And I will say everyone has degrees now. And I think it's extremely important, don't get me wrong, but not having the degree, I think still highlighting what you've accomplished, whether it's work or even school. I have lots of friends that when they were getting out of college, they were highlighting that they were, on the National Honor Society, or they were part of DECA, or if you just show other ways that, maybe you volunteer and you've moved up in the organization of now you have more responsibilities, that's just as much telling to me than the fact of you having a degree. So hopefully that's helpful. I would just try to, again, dissect that a little bit more and see if you can find, some accomplishments and show some success throughout those current positions or other things you've been involved in throughout the years while you're still getting your degree. Because, in my situation, I meet young people all the time. I also run a summer internship, and they don't have their degrees yet, but they can still stand out of other things that they've been involved in, more responsibility they've taken, things like that. So hopefully that's helpful. Olivia, if you're applying for jobs but do not want your current employer to know, who should you list as references? I wouldn't want to list my current supervisor. Yeah, that's tough. I would say if there's anybody else that you think very highly of. So when I was starting to leave my current line of work, I had mostly managers and supervisors in the healthcare industry. And so what I did was I actually went back to some old professors of mine that I spoke very highly of them, and they respected me a lot to write references for me. I also had I had a coach write a reference for me. So I would see if there's anybody else that you could tap into, other organizations or things like that. Because typically when I call references, they don't all have to be professional to me. I think it's important to have one professional one on there that can speak to your work ethic and things like that in a work environment. But having two or three other non-professional references on there is completely okay. So I would maybe start with that. Ayana, I worked for one company for 13 years and now applying for work again and trying to interview but feel rusty. What do you recommend to be more successful when interviewing? I think practice, practice, practice. I know it's terrible and no one wants to do it, but I've found that when I was going through this changing of careers, I had no idea how to talk about anything HR related because I had no experience in that. Yes, I had communication skills and project management skills and things like that. But if you can have a friend sit down with you and ask you some behavioral questions, which if you type online on Google behavioral interview questions, it populates 50 to 100 questions. If you have a friend sit down with you and ask you, that's super helpful. And there's nothing like being put in the hot seat to get you the best experience possible. So practicing again, having good examples, so that hopefully when you're changing careers and things like that, one of the reasons that we focused on 25 accomplishments for myself is my accomplishments were something that I was very proud of and confident and able to speak about very easily, as opposed to if I was coming up with different examples that I thought suited the perfect situation. That takes a lot more practice of memorizing or touching on certain points, as opposed to being able to use examples that are important to me and I'm very confident in talking about. That's very impressive. And that just again goes to the confidence piece of, if you can tell me a story about when you were super successful and you're smiling and you're glowing, and I'm like, that's impressive to me. That shows emotion, that shows empathy, things like that. And so going through this process, I would practice a lot with a friend, or even just practice some language and stuff by yourself. But also again, having good examples of that you can speak about really easily and be confident in is helpful as well. So
One of the questions that arrived this week was what to do about something negative on your resume, for example, dismissal. Do you address that directly, or do you allow the recruiter to find out about it? What's your advice on that?
If someone is dismissed, I usually don't consider it a red flag unless they can't address it. So for me, I understand things happen, but I really want to know. I want to know a little bit deeper into the situation of why you were let go. And so with that, can you talk to me a little bit more about that? I think it is helpful if you can mention it beforehand, so I don't just see it at the bottom. I know that's not always the case when you're applying online and you have to include a resume, but definitely be able to speak to it and just be honest. There's nothing worse than getting through the interview process and then finding out that someone withheld something or didn't tell me, and then we're a lot deeper in the rabbit hole. So I think that's helpful if you can let them know, but mainly just be able to speak to it and be able to explain the situation. Myself and a lot of other recruiters, we understand, not everyone's perfect. And so, but, just being human.
What do you think drives people to change industries?
This is a great one. I ask people this all the time, actually, because I sit with a lot of career changers. I think what mostly is driving our day and age of people to change careers is it's not uncommon to job hop. So, that's not a red flag on a resume anymore if you're job hopping or if you're changing industries. I did multiple different jobs to figure out what I didn't like, so I found something I did like. And so, with that, one thing that makes people change careers or change jobs is culture, the company, and how they treat their employees and things like that. We live in a much more digital age where I have a lot of people come in and they request the flexibility to work from home, and they request the flexibility to, have a bonus structure as opposed to just a set base salary. And so, as we move more towards that, of our jobs are not just 9 to 5, go into work, chained to the desk. I think those are the driving forces behind a lot of people changing careers, is they want something different. And I think that's totally normal. I wanted something different. I didn't want to be stuck where I was working that same job for 30 years. And so, culture, company, but also just our values. I think, our time is becoming more valuable, and we realize that there's other ways to work than just going into the office. So.
If you'd like to ask a question, please use the Q&A function available on Zoom. We're here for as long as you need us to be. But Haly, do you have anything you'd like to add into this? Any further advice while we wait for questions?
Yeah, I think I don't know if the slide is being sent out, but my email's on here. If you guys have any additional questions you want to send to me, that's totally fine. I would love to go through kind of my process of how I changed careers and things like that. But yeah, I would love to answer any questions and help anyone out any way I can. So yeah. Yeah, another question. Can you talk about the resume screening process and how important a LinkedIn profile is when searching for a new position? Yes, this one is very important in my eyes. As I mentioned, I'm always looking at someone's LinkedIn. So I think having a LinkedIn is very important, especially if you've been in the workforce for a while or if you're trying to change careers. Obviously, your LinkedIn can't highlight some of your strengths and weaknesses and things like that. But having a LinkedIn is very important. Having a very professional LinkedIn. So do you have a picture? Do you have a good bio about yourself? I can tell when people put in a lot of time to their LinkedIn. And so, yes, if I get a really, interesting resume that slides across my table, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go look at their LinkedIn profile. I'm going to go look at their Facebook. I'm going to go look at any social media I can and see if this is a person that I could see in my office and see working in this position. And so I think that's extremely important. And also, LinkedIn is just such a powerful tool. So as you're, continuing this job search process, connect with as many people as you can. Again, those loose ties, and make that mutual connection with that company you want to get in with. And, just be aware that if you make that connection, people are going to go look at your LinkedIn. So again, it's just as important as a resume. Keep it as relevant and up to date as possible. When I run my summer internship, I make my kids update their resume or their LinkedIn once a month. Just to go in there once a month to add some activity that they're doing, or maybe change their bio a little bit to highlight what they've learned in the last month. I just think it's very important to keep that as up to date as possible, just like a resume, because a lot of people find, people on LinkedIn. I search for hours every week for LinkedIn profiles. And so I think it's very important to have it, looking the best and as telling of you. Yeah. After sending a thank you note to a hiring manager, is it appropriate to follow up or inquire concerning your status as a candidate? Absolutely. I actually really appreciate when people do this. I do every 3 or 4 days. So, definitely send a thank you note. An email is appropriate, or a handwritten note is very powerful in my mind. When I get those, I'm just like, wow, I have to call this person tomorrow. Even just if they're not the right candidate, I'm going to call them and thank you for that thank you note and see if I can connect them with somebody else I know. And so, I would inquire every 3 or 4 days afterwards, just because things get busy and sometimes things get put to the wayside. Unfortunately, we're human. So calling every 3 or 4 days, it also shows that, the job is really important to you. And if you're calling me every 3 or 4 days, you're at the top of my list of that's that person that I need to call back. So I think that's very important. Definitely continue inquiring about the position and stuff. Ayana, can I send you a copy of my resume to view and give advice? Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to take a look at it. Um, Beverly, how is it viewed if you quit a job before having another? This is a tough question. Um, I actually quit my job before finding my current one, and I was living off savings, and my parents were not very happy, but I think it's okay. I think it's absolutely okay. Again, just as long as you can address it when going in for that interview, or if you can address it on the resume. Like I've had some people, if you're out of work for some time, maybe you're a single mom or you're on maternity leave, like put that line in there. Um, and so it's not a gap of employment per se. But I think it's okay to quit a job before having another one. You just have to obviously be very diligent in the work you're doing when you're not having that job, to be looking for the right one. But again, if you're changing careers, you have to be a lot more selective. I don't view it negatively if someone quits a job before having another one. I just want to know, what was kind of the breaking point? What made it so bad that you wanted to leave the last job before having another one lined up? And so maybe just being able to speak to that, Beverly, would be helpful. But I don't consider it a negative, or anything like that.
Just before we go, Haly, here's a fun one. What can you tell, or are you prepared to share with us any interview horror stories that you've experienced?
Yeah. I have had one where I was about 5 minutes into an interview. Really nice gentleman. I was very impressed with first impression. And he sat down. I was asking some questions, and literally about a minute into my pitch, he was like, he's like, this isn't going to work for me. I'm just going to have to stand up and leave. And so he just walked out. And so, but at the same time, it was more so just shocking because that had never happened to me before. But I respect him because his time is valuable, and if he knew that wasn't the right fit, that wasn't negative in my eyes. It just was like, well, we came to an agreement much sooner than most. That's kind of my worst story, but I don't think I've had too terribly many, which I'm pretty lucky for. So. Beverly, I was going to say that I just finished my master's degree and want to look at a new direction. Yeah. Beverly, are you wanting to look at a new direction other than what you got your master's in? Because in my eyes, getting a master's degree, a lot of the times they're still very transferable to many different jobs and industries. So I would feel that if you're interested, one thing I do say though is if you're going to get a master's degree, at least give it a try for maybe 6 months in that position. But if that's not what you want, or definitely just figure out how that master's degree can apply to whatever industry you're wanting to get into. That's kind of one of the tricky things that I fought with. Was I was considering of going back to school to get a master's degree. I just couldn't think about, I didn't know what I wanted to get a degree in. I just thought, well, I need a master's. Everyone has a bachelor's. I need a master's. But then, I ended up not getting a master's. But, when people do, even if they don't use that master's, it's not a red flag or alarming to me. Maybe they were just trying to figure out what they don't like till they find what they do like. So.
Are there any final questions we'd like to ask? Or if Haly wants to say, round it up. We will be sharing this webinar, and there will be a questionnaire issued to everybody afterwards. And Haly, I know I included your LinkedIn profile on the invitations, so people are allowed to reach out and connect with Haly that way if they want. But I will be circulating a questionnaire and contact details for Haly if she allows me. But I think some 4 final questions came in.
Kimberly, what are some tips you have for employers during an interview to help make the potential hire less nervous? This is a good one. So what I do, and again, this is kind of focused around my company doing behavioral interviewing. I sit at a very small table in my office. That's just two chairs, and we just pull it up. And the entire first 20 minutes of my interview that I do with people, I'm just purely asking questions. I just want to get to know the candidate. And again, this just gives them the opportunity to tell me a little bit more about themselves and their strengths and their weaknesses, and those are important, but I want someone to tell me a story. And so I found that, usually, especially when I hire my interns and stuff, they come in and they're very nervous. But once you start asking questions and giving them the opportunity to talk and feel valued and listened to, they usually start to ease and relax. And so that's helped a lot. One of the things I fell in love with when I was going through this process and joined my company was my entire first interview. It was like chatting with a dear friend. And so whatever you can do to just take out the red tape or anything like that and just make it a bit more intimate, and more focused on, the interviewee and the interviewer, I think is very helpful. So they don't feel like they're put on the spot, and that you open that door to, I always ask candidates, what kind of questions do you have for me? What do you want to know about me? What do you want to know about my company? And then they feel like, oh, it's not just all about me. And so I think that's pretty helpful, Kimberly. Sally, is age discrimination real? If I'm in my 50s, I haven't looked for a new employer for several years. I don't think age discrimination is real. I sit with, 22-year-olds to 55-year-olds who want to become financial advisors and change careers or start a career. And that doesn't, affect me. I'm more so looking at, in the age situation, what is the reasoning now to change careers? Why are you all of a sudden now looking to change careers? And maybe that's just because you are very comfortable, or you had a great setup. I typically meet people who, when they meet me, they've just reached the glass ceiling. And so, it's not fair for me to judge on that. So I don't think age discrimination is real. But I think, that's just me for my industry and my position. So hopefully that's not, discouraging.
Any final thoughts, Haly?
I don't have any. Like I said, if anyone wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn, or through my email, I would love to look at any resumes or even just sit down with people. I live, pretty close, or I do webcam meetings all the time. I would love to just sit with you and practice language, or if you want to pick my brain on changing careers, more than happy to do that. Like I mentioned, I went through kind of my own process working with an HR specialist, and then now that's kind of what I do for work. So I'm open to anything you guys want to do, and hopefully we can be in touch.
It's funny what you're saying about sitting down with the HR specialist. One of the best investments I ever made was hiring a professional resume writer.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because he literally destroyed my resume, and I was like, I had been sending it out to everybody and not getting any hits, and I was wondering why that was happening. I invested in a resume writer, and he said, "This is why," and he just went boom, 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 boom.
Yep.
And rewrote it, and then I started getting hits.
Yep. My specialist, made me print out a copy, and he literally took a red pen through almost every single line, and he's like, "You're too generic. You're too generic. Yeah. You're not impressing me." And so I would say, if you have the resources to do that, absolutely, it's a huge investment. And while it may seem like a lot up front, and my process was many hours of writing all these accomplishments, essays, and things like that, it paid dividends later to get the job that I love.
Absolutely.
So,
and that's incredibly important, finding a job that you love. Well, thank you very much, everybody. This has been recorded, and I will send the link through if anybody would like to revisit it or share with their friends. And also, I'll be sending out a questionnaire. If you can take 5 minutes to fill it out, all feedback is a gift, and I greatly appreciate what you have to say about this. Keep an eye out for further webinar invitations, and I hope to hear from you soon. And I'll be including Haly's contact details in the email, so you can reach out to her, because she's given us permission for that, which she may end up regretting, because I'm going to be utilizing it. So thank you very much for attending, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.